Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, a show on national television about India's role in the world, India's major partnerships, India's involvement in solving global problems, as well as India's critical challenges which deal with its external environment. Viewers, in this episode, we are looking at very unique phenomenon of military reforms, military integration, military jointness, and the quest for these outcomes and how they are linked to India's national security and its relations with both its adversaries as well as its strategic partners. And to discuss this special topic, I have a very distinguished guest in the studio. Let me introduce you to Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia. General Bhatia is a very distinguished soldier who served the country with great honor for many decades. He was Director General of Military Operations in the Indian Army and also former Director of the Center for Joint Warfare Studies. So, General Bhatia, welcome so much to Indian Diplomacy.
Thank you very much. Honor to be on Indian Diplomacy.
General Bhatia, when we talk of military reforms and the imperative for it, there is seems to be a global push for it. I mean, many major powers are moving with force restructuring, reorganization, adoption of technology. There are a lot of changes happening in the military domain, especially in the last decade or so, and it seems like we are in the middle of some kind of revolution that's happening, and in that context we have just announced the appointment of a new Chief of Defence Staff, Lieutenant General Anil Chauhan. So your thoughts on how important reforms are and why reforms keep happening. If you look back at history also, military organizations have frequently undergone reformation and change as per the changing age and changing times. So why are military reforms so important in the first place?
No, military reforms have to keep pace with a growing nation. Today, India is a risen, responsible, resurgent nation. We are a regional power and we are a global leader. And military is a very important component of comprehensive national power. It's essential in national power. The world looks up to India today for peace and prosperity, for making, for imposing the global, the rule-based global order, and many other things. We're a very respected nation. Presently, I would say that we were a military force and we have to transform a military force to a military power. How do we do that? That is a major challenge. And that is where these reforms are very important, whether it is integration, theaterization, jointness, Atmanirbharta and defense manufacturing basically. You have to project your strategic autonomy, you have to project your military power, whether it's evacuating our students in Ukraine. So all this comes about together from being a military power, in addition to other things. This is what the world is all about. If you look at the USA or China, Russia for that matter, they are military powers. We were a military force and now we are reforming to a military power.
So transition from a force to a power, says General Vinod Bhatia. General Bhatia, reform and change also are relative, right? We always look at what our adversaries and also our partners are doing. So it's not a purely in-house exercise. We also study and follow the trends, and this is of course how military strategy has always been formulated. So in fact, our late first CDS General Bipin Rawat has often publicly said that we have been studying the major reorganizations happening within the US, in Russia, in China, in the UK and other countries, and we are trying to imbibe some best practices from them, and that aspect is critical, right? Because this is a dynamic situation. We observe what they are doing and we try to keep up with the changes or be ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. Given India's security challenges, we have to be present effective and future ready. So if you have a future ready force, you have to see what new age warfare is all about, what our adversaries are doing, what the world is doing. Like I said, we have to contribute to world peace. We have to contribute to Sagar, which our Prime Minister has given to us.
Security and growth,
all in the region. You can't be in a standalone mode and say, okay, I've got two adversaries, so I'll only challenge them. No, it's not that. It is much more. We have defense diplomacy, and that is what the program is all about. We have to reach out on defense because defense is a very important part of diplomacy, and it's a very important part of power. So what we need to do is, and we got to be future ready. New age warfare today, geotechnologies is what drives the military power. And new age warfare is all about imbibing these technologies, identifying, imbibing, inducting and exploiting these technologies. We can't be on a standalone mode and say, okay, I'll fight, I'll be ready for my adversaries only on the borders and not in other domains. The cyber domain, the space domain, the special operations domain are extremely important domains. AI is going to drive a number of things, unattended vehicles, unattended sensors, ISRS chain, space has become important. So how do we get to be future ready? And one thing we have to realize, we have a limited budget because of competing priorities at national level. It is understandable. Every armed forces has a limited budget. No one got a infinite budget. And how do we optimize that budget is a challenge, and that is where I think the CDS becomes very important. He'll have to not only look at jointness, integration, theaterization, but optimizing the defense expenditure while enhancing the combat effectiveness.
Right.
Because you ensure peace through being operationally ready.
Right.
No, we are not here to fight wars. We have to prevent wars, being operationally ready, and that is where we ensure peace for the nation. We have to make sure that we are, we have long-term economic development through peace and stability.
For which we need a combat-ready armed forces and also technologically savvy and adept and cutting-edge armed forces. Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi ji, has always led from the front when it comes to reforms of the military higher organization, and he has taken historic steps, created the position of Chief of Defence Staff, which had been pending for many decades, and he has authorized key functionaries of the national security system to go for deeper transformation of the military, so that, as General Bhatia says, it is in step with the rest of the world. Let's hear from Honorable Prime Minister himself about the need and the thought behind the major military modernization and reforms that are undergoing.
आने वाले समय में हमारी सेना को दुनिया का आधुनिकतम साजो सामान मिलने वाला है, लेकिन साथियों, सेना के प्रभावी होने के लिए आधुनिकता के साथ ही एक और बात महत्वपूर्ण है, ये है जॉइंटनेस। चाहे वर्दी किसी भी तरह की हो, उसका रंग कोई भी हो, कोई भी पहने, लेकिन मकसद एक ही होता है, मन एक ही होता है। जैसे हमारे देश के झंडे में 3 अलग अलग रंग है, लेकिन वो 3 रंग एक साथ होकर जो झंडा बनता है, जो जीने मरने की प्रेरणा देता है। उसी तरह हमारी सेना के तीनों अंगों को आधुनिक सामर्थ्यवान होने के साथ ही व्यवहार और व्यवस्था में आपस में जुड़ना, ये समय की मांग है।
He was Prime Minister of India talking about the essential need for jointness, and this is of course the hub of the whole military reform process that is underway in India. General Bhatia, the phrase that we left the audiences with, ye samay ki maang hai. This is the need of the hour. This is what Prime Minister is saying. So please take us through, the audience, through the whole process of reform that are happening in other parts of the world. Let's start with the big powers and how they have been doing it, and clearly we are observing them, and we are also taking note of them. Of course, we will not copy their reforms wholesale, because there are differences in context, differences in strategic outlook. For example, the US has got a global military footprint, and their theater commands and their jointness has got a different approach compared to ours, which is more focused on homeland defense and on power projection only in the Indo-Pacific. We don't intend to have military presence in far-flung areas of the world. So there are differences, but still PM was referring to the fact that times are changing in the military domain, and so if you start with the US and and with other Western countries, they began this jointness, the push for jointness way back even after World War II, and have been doing it successively. So take our audiences through their efforts and what we can learn from them.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. We've been studying this for a long time. There's 68 nations in the world which had a CDS before we got one.
Before we did.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're called Chief of General Staff,
Yeah,
Chief of
yes,
Defense Staff,
but-
Chief of Joint Staff.
Yeah, the point is that they had someone who was heading the armed forces. It is a
All the wings.
single entity,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So after the group of ministers report, after the Kargil Review Committee, a CDS was to be appointed. It took us a long time to do that. But once it was done, and now we have the second CDS, I think we are reaching there. A little late though, but very effectively. And in our case, jointness has been, I will not say it was not there earlier. There has been jointness. We have operations like 71 War, which I think is the biggest, largest one of the operations and jointly conducted. Then we had Sri Lanka, we had Maldives as part of the Maldives operation myself. But we didn't have formal structures for jointness. And then we didn't optimize that jointness. So that is where I think Prime Minister's directions are categorical and clear. And these directions have come to us from 2014 onwards. Our jointness, our integration, our theaterization. So this is what the Prime Minister has been giving the directions, and this is what is to be implemented now. And we have started off with the Defense Cyber Agency. We have headquarter ideas in IMPARD. They have taken the ownership of jointness. So things are moving in the right direction, though slow. But if you look at the world, the US had went into jointness after they studied this in the mid-80s. And China started the jointness after in 2015 onwards. Russia had a jointness. They have this thing. The UK, of course, UK is a small armed forces. But major armed forces in the world are not only joint, they're integrated, and they look at everything from the top to bottom and bottom upwards. Whereas we had, like the Prime Minister himself said, we had three colors, but the three colors represent the nation, Army, Air Force, Navy. Security, the very concept of security has changed over the years. When we talk of security, we talk of comprehensive national security, right? It is not only security in the conventional domain of safeguarding our territories, whether it's the maritime territories, borders, or our land borders, but security in a bigger way, that is protecting and projecting a national interest. That is the key of security. So if we got to do that effectively, and I say that effectively, underline effectively, we need jointness, we need integration, we need theaterization, we need a single directive from top, which the Prime Minister has given us, and this needs to be implemented in the Indian context, right? Indian context. Right. That's very important.
Yeah, General Rawat used to say,
yes,
we study the models of the other powers, but it has to be tailor-made for our national security needs.
Indian context, Indian character. Right. We have got certain very major assets, right? Leadership, our men, very major assets, which the other armed forces do not have. So we've got to optimize that, and we've got to have it in Indian context. Our systems are different. It has to be, we are under the democratic system. We can't be, like Pakistan or China or Russia. We are a democratic nation.
Right. Authoritarian model reforms happen by fiat from the top, but here we have to consolidate and
So it has, that's why it's a top down, top bottom, and that the Prime Minister's actions are there, and now we've got to work up bottom upwards. So that is where the integration and the jointness will take place. It is not that's not taking place. We have joint structures, but that formal systems, formal structures is what is being put into place now, and that is what the CDS is going to do.
Yeah. And General, talking of other countries and how they view us, I mean, the strategic partners, major strategic like Quad members and all of them have been keen that India should go for more jointness, because they have already done the integration, most of them in their own respective militaries. And I was reading David Brewster, a well-known Australian commentator, who was saying that if India also has integrated all the tri-services under a single command, then it's easier for us to do joint exercises with them, because otherwise it's all disjointed. Although we are trying now to do tri-service level exercises, I mean Indian Army, Navy, Air Force all together with our partner countries, but it's still not under a single command. So how much more beneficial will it be for our foreign policy and our strategic partnerships if we are, within our own internally, if we are reorganized in a better way?
I think what you say is an imperative. It has to be done. And the direction on the top is that it has to be done. To get it right is very important. And like I said, it should not follow and you also said the same thing, it should not follow the American model or the Chinese model or any other model. It has an Indian model. And that is what we are doing. That is how I think things are going to move in the right direction. Things are moving in the right direction. And we need integrated theatre commands. We need to optimize our resources. We need to optimize our combat effectiveness. And this should go a little beyond integration of the three services. We have to integrate other elements also. A civil military fusion is required. R&D is required. Research and development is required. We need Atmanirbharta and defense manufacturing, which is very important. So all these structures have to come together, and we need to go ahead and read the other models, study the other models, and come out with the Indian model. And that is where I'm very sure it has been done already. The studies have happened.
Yeah.
And we await. We should take our time doing it. We have taken our time doing it, and once the implementation comes about, there will be problems. There will be problem acceptability. There will be problems of this thing, and nothing comes. No transformation happens without problems. And we have to have a roadmap, and we have to have a transition management in place. That is very important. Without transition management, because we have to be present relevant also.
Yeah.
So we have the transition management becomes very important. Fortunately we have the political backing.
Yeah.
And it is not only the CDS, more important is also equally important is the CDS as the DMA, Department of Military Affairs. So that is a very major reform. It's a very, very major reform because that gives them the authority. Otherwise, accountability and authority have to be aligned. And the DMA and the CDS, where the authority and accountability is aligned, it is a major change. And this is now where I think India is on the takeoff stage from transforming from military force to a military power.
Takeoff stage, says General Vinod Bhatia. Viewers, one of the powers that has done this transition already and few years ahead of India is China. And China, of course, a major strategic adversary of India and poses many challenges to India's national security. And it's also a big competitor on the world stage for power and influence. I have an interesting analysis by a scholar from the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, MS Pratibha. She is a specialist on China's force modernization. Let's listen to what she has to say about the reforms that China has done and then resume this discussion.
In 2015, the Chinese leadership implemented wide-ranging reforms and restructuring to modernize its PLA. And there were many reforms, but one of the most important ones is the implementation of the theatre command. Now, if you see before the reforms, China had military regions, and the military regions were mostly mobilization in peacetime. So the leadership felt that if there was in a situation of a potential conflict, the military regions won't be able to mobilize as fast as they wanted them to. Second, within the military regions, there were many units which were operating independently in terms of training, and they didn't have clarity and unity of purpose in terms of understanding their adversary and coming up with an operational plan which is much more integrated in fashion. They didn't have the structure to facilitate such planning. And third, they were restricted in terms of the smooth, because there was no smooth communication of decisions through the organizational command, chain of command. So the theatre command sought to change all these issues. The theatre command has improved the joint operational command of the theatre, which means that they have now a much more situational awareness of the battlefield during the course of the war. They're able to come up with an understanding of how the war is progressing because of that. So overall, if you see, the theaterization has made China much more efficient in terms of conducting joint operations and have an understanding of the enemy's adversaries' capabilities and coming up with an operational plan to counter it.
So Dr. MS Pratibha of IDSA telling us about China's transformation, and China's reforms, and these are of course very recent. It's the last major power to undergo shift to theater commands, and the Western Theater Command, for example, is assigned to handle India, and we've had major clashes as well as confrontations with them at the LAC after they have done these transformations. General Bhatia, Chinese obviously they loom large in our strategic consciousness, and year by year it is quite clear. In fact, late General Rawat, CDS, used to say that it is the enemy number one, and we can't shy away from the fact. And they have done these deep military reforms, and as our expert was saying, they have become more effective with information and with situational awareness, and with also being able to counter the adversaries. They are now better organized. Now this is one reason why I think there is a great urgency. We should show greater urgency to move forward with our own changes.
I think China has always been a threat. To say that China was not a threat is wrong. China has always been a major threat. We have always taken China as a major adversary. To that we should have no doubts about it. And it's not only that it is, it is manifested now in its aggressiveness along the line of actual control. And one of the reasons could be because the Chinese reforms took place from 2015 to 2020. It's 2020 that we see the aggressive behavior along the line of actual control. But I think it's a little too early. But in the Indian context, let me also assure your audience that we were fully prepared. It's not that we were not, and we've done very well, exceedingly well. It is for the first time the PLA has vacated areas and gone back.
Yeah, we pushed them out.
We pushed them back. They were surprised by our strategic resolve. It's not that. But when it comes to integration, I think one of the major things which China has done, and we should learn the lessons from there, is having a strategic force. Right. Now that
nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons, cyber, EW, that's strategic force. So it is okay to have a Western Theater Command. Fine, we can handle that. And we all know, we also know integration. There's a certain difference between integration and jointness, right? We should know the difference and work towards both. We have jointness in one place, and we are integration. When we are integration, we move as one machinery.
Army, Navy, Air Force.
No, there's no Army, Navy, Air Force. It's one integration, one force. It's a package. It's all in one. Right? Jointness will have certain structures which are still joint, as we say. Integration is more than jointness.
So more advanced.
Stage of jointness, right? And so we have to go for integrated theater commands.
Integrated theater commands is the future, and
I would rather say integrated theaters, not even commands, because commands gives a misnomer. We should have integrated theaters. Why should we follow the Chinese or the Americans have commands? We have integrated theaters, and theaters have their own responsibilities. They have their own area of responsibilities, their own way of preventing wars or deterring wars.
Deterring adversaries. And General, when it comes to our friends and partners also, we do a lot of joint exercises. We are now wanting to show greater presence. There are these concepts of the air, sea battle, and all of these which are linked, which involved jointness and integration. So how prepared are we for these emerging areas, especially given the Indo-Pacific? That's the real theater in the long run, where I think the contest for pole position in Asia and in the world are going to be decided. And on that front, how ready are we, and how much more further can we go in terms of our unification of all our service wings, so that we are able to really apply countervailing pressure on the adversary, and how much power can we actually show them that will push them back?
That's a very interesting one. Firstly, we have to understand that we got nearly 40 countries with which we have a strategic partnership.
Yes.
Right. And then we are part of all multilaterals. That we have wanted. Indo-Pacific is only one of them. And Indo-Pacific is very important. We gain from each other the best practices. Indian armed forces are one of the most battle-hardened, combat-rich force in the world. Okay. We've been very effective. And at minimum costs. We have to understand that. So it is not only that we have to gain from there, they also have to gain from us. It is mutual. We are we're equal partners in the Indo-Pacific.
Right.
Both strategically, operationally, in terms of resources also. So Indo-Pacific, we have to equal partners. We cannot say the others are better partners and we are lesser partners. No, sorry.
Right.
Indo-Pacific is our backyard, and you rightly said it. It is the area which is going to be contested, and we are prepared for that. And that is where I think, let's take China for example. What do we want from China? We want to deter China's aggressive behavior, period. Right? Containment or whatever we call it. How do we do it? I will term it as a 3D strategy. Defend the line of actual control.
Yes.
Because without having, dominate the oceans, because we are a peninsular nation, and deter China's aggressiveness by bind to balance with like-minded nations where we have congruence and convergence of interests, and that's where the Quad comes into play, right? So it is not only one, it's not only Quad. We have to do all these things together, and that is exactly what we are doing. It's not that we, look at the Navy which is going. We have just commissioned the IAC
Aircraft
for the
carrier.
aircraft carrier,
Yes.
our own. We have, redeployed, carried out some rebalancing along the line of actual control. We have gone to multilateral this thing. We wanted by the world. Look at even SCO.
Absolutely, absolutely. So India is wanted by the world, and there is this 3Ds strategy, says General Vinod Bhatia, for India to handle the Chinese expansionism. Military reforms are going to be very critical. Military integration, jointness, all these things are very, very crucial as we face up to this dragon, not just on the northern borders, but all along our southern littoral in the Indian Ocean and in the Pacific. So that's all we have time for on this episode, viewers. But I want to thank General Bhatia for sharing his deep insights. Thank you, General.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us. And really, the sum of this discussion is that the world is moving in a certain direction. International relations depend a lot on whether we are alert to the changes that are happening all around us, and India is alert, and India is observing and taking close note of military reorganization in other parts of the world, and we are trying to keep up with those changes, and we are trying to also reform our processes to integrate, as the Prime Minister said, the three colors, like the three colors of the Indian flag. The three service wings are coming closer, and we are aiming for theatre commands and for closer integration, so that we really pack a punch when it comes to our adversaries. And of course, as General Bhatia said, India is also most desirable partner, strategic partner for so many, especially democracies around the world, and that also our desirability will rise if we are seen to be more efficient, more combat ready, and more organized in terms of jointness. So thank you, viewers. Keep thinking about military strategy and how it impacts our foreign relations. These are not two separate things, they are actually interconnected domains. I'll see you again next time. Until then, take care.